Maya's earliest memories were filled with quiet rooms and heavy silences. Their apartment was small, the kind of place where every sound carried through thin walls, but what Maya remembered most was not noise, it was the absence of it. Her mother moved through the rooms like a shadow after long shifts at work, her face lined with exhaustion. Her father carried a permanent edge in his voice, as if life itself had disappointed him, and he could not forgive it. Maya was only a child, but she was old enough to notice the way love rarely spoke in her house. What did speak was dismissal. She carried notebooks wherever she went, scribbling stories in cramped handwriting, inventing worlds where people listened, where people cared. She wanted to share those worlds with her parents, to show them that inside her silence, something was alive and burning. One evening, when she was 12, she dared to break the usual stillness. Her father was sitting in his chair, eyes fixed on the television, when Maya approached with papers in her hand. "Papa," she said quietly, holding the story out to him. "I wrote something today. Do you want to read it?" Her father glanced at the messy stack, then at her. For a second, her heart leapt, thinking he might smile, might encourage her. But instead, his mouth curved into a thin smirk. "Stories," he scoffed. "Those won't put food on the table. Stop wasting your time, Maya. Be practical." She froze, clutching the papers tighter as if they might shatter. The words stung, but she didn't argue. Instead, she nodded and backed away, hiding the pages in her room. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering to herself, "Maybe one day he'll understand." Years passed, but her father's words followed her like shadows. At 16, she won a small school essay contest. The certificate was printed on thin paper, but to her, it felt like gold. She brought it home, placed it proudly on the dinner table, and waited for someone to notice. Her mother barely glanced at it as she served rice. Her father looked at it once, then shrugged. "It's just school," he muttered, focusing on his food. Maya swallowed her disappointment. Still, she tried again. "Papa," she said hesitantly, "I think I want to be a writer. Maybe publish books one day." Her father's fork clinked against his plate. He didn't look up. "Writers don't come from people like us. Do you see anyone in this family with money for that? You'll end up starving. Stop dreaming." Her mother shifted in her seat, her tired eyes flickering between them, but she said nothing. The silence felt like a verdict. Maya's voice trembled. "But it makes me happy." Finally, her father looked at her, his tone sharp. "Happiness doesn't pay bills. Remember that." Maya lowered her gaze, pushing food around her plate, her appetite gone. The lump in her throat was heavier than the meal in front of her. That night, once again, she wrote in secret, her pen scratching against paper like a quiet rebellion. At school, the loneliness continued. She wasn't bullied in the loud, cruel way some kids are, but she was ignored, which often felt worse. She ate her lunches at the edge of the playground, notebook balanced on her knees. Teachers called her shy, classmates forgot her name, but inside her stories, she was someone else. Bold, fearless, alive. One teacher finally noticed. Mrs. Alvarez, her English teacher, handed back an essay with a small smile. "Maya," she said gently, "you have talent. Real talent. Have you ever thought about entering a writing contest?" Maya blinked, her heart skipping. I don't think I'm good enough." Mrs. Alvarez leaned closer, her voice warm. "Trust me. You are." It was the first time anyone had said those words to her. That night, she sat at her desk, torn between her father's voice, "Stop dreaming, be practical," and her teacher's, "Trust me, you are." For the first time, she chose to believe the kinder one. She entered the contest. Weeks later, her name was called as the winner. She stood on stage, the applause washing over her like sunlight after years of rain. But when she came home with the award, her father barely glanced at it. "School thing," he muttered, dismissing it. Maya felt the sting again, but this time, something inside her had shifted. She no longer needed his approval to keep writing. College was harder. Money was always tight, and dreams were expensive. She worked nights at a diner, scrubbing floors and carrying trays until her back ached. Some nights, she skipped meals just to afford bus fare. She applied to publishers with trembling hands, receiving rejection after rejection. Not this time. Not a fit. Not good enough. Each rejection echoed her father's voice, yet each one also pushed her deeper into her craft. She wrote through tears, through hunger, through doubt. Her stories grew stronger because they were carved from pain. One evening, when she was on the verge of giving up, an email arrived. A small magazine wanted to publish one of her short stories. She read the message again and again, hardly believing it. Slowly, more doors opened. Another magazine. Then another. Finally, years later, a publisher said yes to her first book. On the day of her book signing, Maya stood in a bookstore with a line of people waiting to meet her. She held a pen in her hand, the same way she once held those secret notebooks as a child. A young girl approached shyly, clutching her own notebook. "I want to be a writer too," the girl whispered. Maya smiled, her eyes wet with tears. "Then promise me something," she said softly. "Promise me you'll never let anyone convince you that your dreams don't matter." The girl nodded, her face lighting up with hope. That night, when the bookstore was empty and the lights dimmed, Maya finally allowed herself to breathe. She thought back to those dinners where silence was sharper than words, to her father's dismissals, to her mother's weary indifference. For so long, she had wondered if she was enough. Now, she knew she always had been. Her story was not just about becoming a writer. It was about surviving a home that never believed in her, about carrying hope even when no one handed it to her, about proving that even the quietest voices can rise above the noise of dismissal. Maya had once been a little girl asking her father to read her stories. Now, the world was reading them instead. Maya remembered the first time she gathered the courage to speak her dream out loud. She was only 12, her knees tucked under her as she sat on the living room floor, papers scattered around her like fallen leaves. She had been writing all afternoon, pouring her heart into a story about a girl who could fly. When her father walked in, tired from work but still carrying that sharp edge in his voice, she looked up with hopeful eyes. "Papa," she said softly, holding up the crumpled pages. "I wrote something. Do you want to read it?" He glanced at the papers, then at her eager face. For a moment, she thought he might say yes. But instead, he shook his head with a half-smile that wasn't kind. "Stories? Maya, those won't put food on the table. Stop wasting your time. Be practical. Dream smaller." The words landed like stones. She lowered her gaze, pressing the pages to her chest as if to shield them. Another time, years later, she tried again. She was 16, sitting at the dinner table where silence often sat heavier than the food itself. She had just won a small school award for an essay, and pride flickered briefly in her heart. Gathering her courage, she looked across the table. "Papa, I think I want to be a writer. Maybe even publish books one day." Her father didn't look up from his plate. He stabbed a piece of food with his fork, chewed slowly, and muttered, "Writers don't come from people like us. Do you see anyone in this family with a library? With money? No. You'll end up starving." Maya's throat tightened. Her mother shifted in her seat, her eyes tired, but she didn't speak. The clinking of cutlery filled the silence where encouragement should have been. Maya whispered, almost to herself, "But it makes me happy." Her father finally looked up, his eyes sharp. "Happiness doesn't pay bills, Maya. Remember that." She didn't answer. Instead, she swallowed her words along with the lump in her throat. That night, when the house was quiet, she wrote again, not because anyone believed in her, but because it was the only way to keep her heart alive.